Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining in for this very special NHRDN conversation on revamping talent management strategies for the modern workplace. I'm Shivani. I'm a member of the NHRDN Young Talent Council, and I'm also going to be your host for today. We all live in times of great flux, be it forces of AI, technology adoption in general, the fact that we have multiple generations cohabiting the workspace, or how the nature of the workspace itself has evolved post the pandemic, are some of the forces that are impacting us all. And every once in a while, perhaps on a Friday afternoon, it's a good idea to sit back and reflect on some of these and just unpack the context that we are in. And to help us do this today in a conversation, we have two esteemed HR leaders. We have Ms. Neetu Bhushan, who's the CHRO South Asia for Pernod Ricard. Welcome, ma'am. And we have Mr. Rajiv Dubey, Chairman, Mahindra Brokers Limited, Mahindra Steel Service Center Limited, and Mahindra First Choice Wheels. Thank you so much, Rajiv and Neetu, for spending your Friday afternoon with us. And we're looking forward to a very engaging conversation for all of us.
Likewise.
Great. So at the outset, I think, when we look at you both leading the organizations that you do, I think amongst you, you cover such diverse areas of the economy, such different industries. So I think perhaps to start with, we'd want to understand that in your respective industries, how are you seeing the forces of technology impact these sectors, be it your customers, be it your employees, be it your processes, and just everything else. So maybe just if you could give us a sense of how the context of your industry is changing with regards to technology.
Okay. Rajiv, would you like to go?
No, why don't
first?
you go first?
Great. So Shivan, first of all, thank you for having me here. And I'm super conscious. This is the session that's holding everyone back from their weekend. So we're going to try and make it a really happy start. I work with Pernod Ricard, and I'm very, very delighted to be here today. A lot of you would be familiar with our brands, if not the organization. So if you're having a discerning drink later today, chances are it's a Pernod Ricard brand. I make it a point to say that every time I'm on a forum like this, I was told everyone who's joining in is at least 21 or above, so I can sort of safely say that. For all my love and respect for these gadgets, the company I work with, our products are products of great craftsmanship and legacy and heritage. They were not really assembled on an assembly line, if you let me say that. So while we take great pride in that, we've been moving with the times. Oftentimes I meet young people who remind me that we're a media dark category, which just breaks my heart, because you take the 4 Ps of marketing and reduce it to one small part of 1 P. Yeah. So there's a lot that technology interfaces and is doing for our category as well. Whether it's optimization of sales, a lot of sales optimization tools that we use, a lot of tools that we use, especially on the analytics side. When we're looking at promotion spending, how are we optimizing that? Where are the places that we're spending on? How consumers interacting with our category online. There's a number of really interesting projects that our teams have done. There's one in particular that I'm very fond of. Our Absolute team. Absolute is our premier vodka brand. It holds the largest market share in India at this point in the imported vodka space. And these are our teams in Canada. For example, they used AI, I thought, very creatively in getting people across neighborhoods to describe what their neighborhood looks like and what makes their neighborhood unique. And we fed that into an AI engine and got the AI engine to create a visual art of what a cocktail representing that neighborhood would look like. And then we worked with bartenders to create that cocktail. And we've worked really across the spectrum on the entire sort of procure to pay space, especially on analytics. In HR, I'm sure later on in the chat we'll be talking about how we use AI. Uh, I personally, subscribe to the view that Angela Ahrens has. The technology is a conduit; it's an enabler, and that's all that we should see it as. Across, if you look at the last 100 years, there have been different points in time where emails have replaced interoffice memos and something replaced a fax. Look at it as an enabler. That's how we see it. It's doing wonders for our category.
Thank you so much for sharing that insight. I think the absolute example, really enlightening how communities are being brought together using technology. It's a really wonderful example. Rajiv, over to you. How's technology changing your world?
Yeah, okay. So I think it's impacting both the demand and the supply side. So demand, obviously, our users are becoming very dependent on technology. For example, I mean, my span of connection with businesses actually goes across many industries. If you see the three companies that I'm connected with, one has to do with multi-brand used cars, one has to do with insurance, and one has to do with steel centers. So clearly there are varying degrees of impact of technology, but I can say that both the demand and the supply are completely dependent on technology. It's becoming like electricity. Technology and AI, I guess, would be one important aspect. So let me leave it at that. I could go into detail, but both demand and supply, both what's happening outside and what we are doing inside to meet the demand of our people, are being hugely impacted by technology, right? Which means also attitudes, behaviors, all that, and that nebulous word called culture. Everything is being impacted.
True, true. I think, like you said rightly, with the span, with the varied industries that you are seeing the same journey happening in, perhaps at different paces in different formats. I think that's a very unique perspective. I just had a follow-up question that, and this is to you, Rajiv, that if you were to just like step back and look at these three different industries that you have sort of like the bird's eye view to, how would you see the journey of these three different companies broadly differ in terms of technology? Are they at the same pace? Are their focuses different? Are there like common strategies that are working for them? Just like a bird's eye view for us.
Yeah. So I would say that the used car business was actually set up with the objective of being hugely dependent on technology. Right from the beginning, it was a platform company. So we were using a platform to connect demand and supply, right? So it was set up and it was using pretty advanced algorithms for many, many years. The steel service centers, on the other hand, is a hugely B2B. As you can imagine, that used car business is, you can call it B2C. Actually, it's B2B2C, right? The steel service center is a very heavy B2B, right? And insurance brokers is again B2B2C, right? I think the insurance broking company is a little, just a tad little behind the used car business in terms of how much technology has permeated into its culture and into its way of working, but they're catching up pretty fast. The steel service center company, which is a manufacturing company, so clearly, its use of technology is slightly different. The other two are more service oriented, although the used car business has a physical sort of product, but it's all packed up with all kinds of services, including insurance and finance, and everything is heavily data driven. I mean, so is insurance broking, but the steel service center also uses data, but it's not dealing with that vast amounts of consumer data and data coming in from different parts of the supply chain as the other two. Again, I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is as clear as mud. Am I making any sense at all?
No, I think it made a lot of sense. And I think like you very precisely called out for us that it's so intrinsic to the company's business about why it might need to adopt technology and how it might do so. So I think that that's very insightful. And that actually, following from that, I wanted to ask you both the next question that you have observed as HR leaders when some of these technologies have got adopted in your businesses, be it like the fact, like in case of the Mahindra first choice, it's technology first, like the product and the service depends on the technology. Whereas in case of, let's say, the Absolute campaign, it is like a fillip to marketing, it unlocks a new way to market the product. So if you could just like step back and give us us an insight that how have you seen some of these discussions around these new technology adoptions play out within your org? Like, to even simplify the question, that has this adoption been that inside out, that the innovation first happened and you took it to the market, or have there been cases that competition has pivoted your orgs to say that no, we also need to now step up and be like stride along our competition? And have you had instances of resistance or taking the larger org along on these changes? So if you could just give us a sense of what takes for the leadership within the organization to drive and champion this change, because it's huge. So whichever one of you would want to go first.
The lady first.
No pressure. So, I think, Shivani, our way of looking at it is, we play in the premium wine and spirit space. And that's the market where we have a little more than 40% of market share. So a large part of the responsibility, which we feel thrilled about, is shaping the category. So to that extent, I would say that a lot of these have been things that we've looked at from a, let's it's great, let's try it out sort of lens. I think with anything that's to do with innovation, I'm still looking for the company that gets a 10 on 10 right, or with new product launches, or with anything that's being tried out for the first time. um, so I'm not even going to attempt to say that, we've looked at 10 prototypes and all 10 have been absolutely bullseye. I think the good part about being a market leader and having that sort of PNL is you can optimize, and you can say there are some big bets that we're going to take. As far as digital is concerned, especially in a market like India, where you look at our digital penetration or data tariff rates being the lowest in the world. I mean, our smartphone penetration is much higher and better than insurance and banking
True.
in so many ways. So there's no escaping it. I think there may have been a time where there were a few naysayers and people who would want to say, but is this going to work or not? But I think we're past that. Now it's about, who's able to get to it first and who's able to scale it up profitably first. I think that's where it is. um, so I think that's how I see it. I've not really seen or sensed any sort of resistance. I've seen a lot of excitement around it, especially with the branding teams, the teams in supply chain, because especially what makes our business a little bit more complicated is alcohol is a state subject. So running an alcohol business in India is like running it across 29 countries in the world, from complete prohibition to a retail distributor-led market. So there is no alternative to having great analytics and insights. And to me, they're two distinct fields. They're not interchangeable at all. So we've had a great deal of excitement, and that also comes on the back of the sort of market position that we feel very privileged to have in a number of our subcategories. Yeah, so that'd be my take on it.
Thank you for sharing. I think that's what we look to our market leaders also for, like, to innovate. And then I think then you open up opportunities for the entire sector. So thank you for sharing that. Rajiv, how would you sort of assess similar changes in your, in the companies you see as well?
So I think the main drivers for how much technology you need and how fast you need to embrace it is driven by what is the consumer problem that we are seeking to solve. And in our case, let me stick to the used car business, because otherwise I'll be all over the place. So here we were trying to uh, organize an unorganized space. We were trying to give the consumer information that he or she could trust, information regarding the quality of the vehicle, information regarding the pricing, information regarding what you could do if you had a problem. So that was one major driver of how much technology and how much data dependent we were to be, and how everybody working in our company had to be familiar and on top of the use of the technology to be able to give the basic information that our consumers require. Of course, the competitive pressures also played a big role, because when we started off, we thought that our competitor was the friendly neighborhood used car broker. And then very soon we realized that our actual competitors were these platforms that were coming up.
Mm.
and they were using technology in a huge way, and therefore we obviously had no choice but to offer a better value proposition to our customers if we wanted to survive. So it was both. One, what is the problem that we are trying to solve for our consumer, and how much technology do we need to leverage? And B, what is the nature of the competition that we are facing? So these were the two drivers. So that's one question. I think your second question had to do with, was there some resistance
The
to it?
process of change, yeah.
Yeah. I think the biggest resistance probably may have been from old people like me, because most of the people in the first choice wheel setup are very young people. So they adapt very fast and they have no choice.
Mm.
They absolutely have no choice. They can't survive for one day if they are not tech savvy. So I think the resistance was not there. What was lacking probably was the speed and the amount of investment that we were making and the robustness of the technology platform that we were creating. Because we actually had to create it ground up. There wasn't something we could pick up off the market.
That's such a lovely example, and I think what really stays with me is how technology can somehow unlock competition that you hadn't foreseen as your primary competition. Like, it's so interesting that sectors are so fluid now. You could be a product company, but because of marketing you also need to have a great social media presence. So there are folks you're competing in that category with, which you wouldn't consider your traditional competition, but just because of virtue of technology and how everybody's connected on it, it's like the sectors are just merging into each other. I think that's something, like you said, very interesting for professionals today to keep in mind, that it's not as fixed. Technology unlocks these things. That's great to hear, and I think both of you hinted towards this, like the process of change that, be it resistance, be what competition, it necessitated for the organization to do and take up. I wanted to ask that, as a people function in these respective organizations, like you said, these changes were so central to your business and you had to equip the folks. Would you like to share examples or a story of how, what your strategy has been in terms of equipping the people in the company to lead this change, be it in terms of upskilling themselves, or for that matter, org restructuring that might have been required, or even if your hiring strategies had to change so that your org was more ready to adopt these tech changes? So if you want to share those, Neetu, if you'd want to take a shot at it first.
Sure, sure. Shivani, I should have added a disclaimer about myself at the start. One of the reasons I really desist from posting a lot on LinkedIn is I run the risk of being trolled very heavily and possibly having my account suspended by the company itself. I hold a slightly contrary view on some of these things. Yeah. I don't think people are different in different sectors. I don't subscribe to these theories about HR is very different in a bank compared to a chocolate company compared to pharmaceuticals. I think there are times our fraternity manufactures jargon and white papers faster than it does anything else. I've lived through the whole story of offices are a thing of the past and kirana stores are a thing of the past, and everything will only be done online. Indeed, there might be such a day, but the pace at which this was foretold is what really intrigues me. To me, with any of these change cycles, so one is that. So from a people management lens, I'll tell you the other unique thing that I've heard in every single company that I've worked in, and I've been very, very fortunate. I mean, I have no awkwardness in admitting that everyone else is Destiny's Child, but when it comes to careers, I've been Beyonce. For the folks that I've just had the privilege of being in the same room with at times. Um, the one thing I've heard across all companies is there's no category or sector which is more complex than ours,
Hmm.
almost as a badge of honor. Of generation after generation of leaders, if we're saying that we're very complex and wearing it as a badge of honor, then I wonder what folks have been doing. Yeah, and that's common. The second is India is a very complicated market. So this works everywhere else, and it may be a great practice everywhere else, but it won't work here. I think
Mm.
my learning has been when once we've bought into the case for change. For example, we ran an industry first project called Unbox, where we did away with permanent mono cartons. So when you buy a bottle of alcohol, it comes in a cardboard box, and that box goes inside a larger box that's called the outer shipper carton. I don't want to make supply chain professionals on this call and hand out diplomas, but that carton in which your individual bottle comes, that's the mono carton, and we did away with that. Great for the environment, great on ESG, fantastic for us from a future readiness. But along with that, all the folks would say that this is going to be very difficult to pull off, because think
Mm.
about how it complicates life for the folks in supply chain. Think about what happens to returns and breakages. Think of it from a consumer's lens. You suddenly imagine you're buying your favorite toothpaste, and I don't want to name any brands, and that box is gone. The first thought on your mind is, this is probably fake.
Open
So
and
we
see the fake.
started, so we started with all of those challenges. But to me, fundamentally, what has been true across sectors is, have we bought into the case for change? And why are we doing this? If we've got that, we'll find the solutions to everything else. And then it's about training people, skilling them up, anticipating problems, running that pilot long enough. In this case, stress testing the logistics on the worst terrains in the country to see what's the worst that's going to happen, what's the kind of breakages we're looking at, before we scale those ideas up. Be ready to learn from the front line. I think if there's one thing that I would beg HR teams to do, is to be more present at the point of sale and at the point of manufacturing. There is no greater B school on the face of the planet than those two. I've heard so much conversation about work from home, work from office, point of sales, point of manufacturing. That option doesn't even exist. It's a slightly elitist problem that we talk about when we talk about work from home. Yeah. Because the profit centers don't have that option.
Mm.
So we're talking about the problems of a very small part of our companies when we go into those. So to me, it's about getting that buy-in for the case for change, and then really sticking with it. Because if you wait, there are many ways to show resistance without saying I don't agree with you. I can keep asking for data endlessly. I can keep asking for, let's plan for scenario A, B, C, alpha, beta, and omega. And create so much fatigue in the system that things will never go live. And I think
Mm.
that's where leadership teams step in, and that's where I think people managers step in. Because like I said, we're never going to get it 10 on 10 right in any case. But to show that sort of leadership, courage, and conviction is important. um, and be ready to take the brick bets. Make sure we protect our teams against those. So to me, that's been how we prepare. Look at capacity, capability, culture. My own team is sick of me saying this to them, but to me, across companies, what is it that we're looking to achieve? Do we have the right team, staffing, deployment, build, buy, borrow, bot? If we've got that right, do they have the right capabilities for today and for tomorrow? And we've got those two right. Have we got the right ecosystem? Do we have a pay for performance culture, and are we walking the talk? So to me, it's, what are we trying to achieve? Have we got these three C's right from an HR lens? And then are we
Mm.
going after it with every cell in our being?
I think that's such a fundamental lesson for all HR professionals, right? Like, link yourself up to the business problem first, the why of the business. You have to be like absolutely hand in glove with that, and then like everything works to answer that. And thanks so much for sharing that. Rajiv, how about you? Also, because three different companies would have would perhaps have three different people strategies towards the different technology journeys. So, how has that experience been?
Yeah. Again, I would just go back to what you said, that everything that HR does actually has to be driven by the needs of the business. So the most important thing is to make sure that there is huge alignment with the business, and that whatever HR does, and you specifically talked about skilling and reskilling, which is of course a very, very important part, but there are many other sort of aspects of HR, as everybody here would know, because there are so many HR levers, and each one of them is sort of interconnected. So you have to fire on all cylinders. But whatever we do, I think the most important thing is to always be driven by the needs of the business and by the strategy of the company. The needs of the business obviously has to be dictated by the strategy of the business and by the sort of short-term sort of transactional needs. But that connection, and if I may dare to say, for HR, also the purpose and to focus always, I think, on the culture part. The most difficult part in the application of technology uh, is actually the human side of it. How do people take to it? Are you able to create the culture that unleashes the full potential of the ecosystem, including the human beings and the technology that you use? But there's a culture there. We're talking about behaviors. So that connection should not be forgotten. My real sort of worry is that a lot of people get so seduced by technology that they somehow forget that it's not technology alone that will do anything. There are human beings that are working with the technology, and we should never forget the human part of whatever HR does. And to me, actually, that is the biggest concern. That we forget that connection, that link in that equation, that it's technology plus people. And when we talk about people, then we are talking about, what their expectations are, what their beliefs are, what their needs are. And that doesn't mean that you sacrifice productivity, that you sacrifice the so-called hardcore business. No, in fact, all the so-called soft part is all focused towards creating the business performance. But they're connected, and we can't forget that.
That's so true. I think this creates this bit of curiosity where I just want to ask to both of you, because you both mentioned culture. That either culture enables this change, or sometimes the culture itself needs to be changed to enable the next direction that the company is going in. So, if you could take a minute to think of one aspect of your company culture, right, which just changed because a major business change had happened. Like it might be like hierarchies or ways of working or communication, but something that once it changed, it sort of catalyzed the change that the business was working towards. Either that, or on the other hand, one cultural aspect which you could clearly see, the org could see, might be inhibiting the org from spearheading into one direction. If you'd just like to share for us to get a sense of how deeply culture can either catalyze or stall some of these changes.
I there's somebody on the chat just asked how I feel about working for the company that I work for. I feel fantastic. I think it's an incredible organization. It's a privilege to be a part of it. Um, and I just feel the need to address it because I've been asked this question in so many different ways. The person asking the question has been very kind. But I've been asked this question in many different ways, including how do you live with the morality of working for an alcohol company? I just try to remind them I have worked with a bank and a pharma company before this. So, to me, it's that simple. You put your mind to abusing a category, then there is no such category on the face of this planet that you cannot make a case study out of. We're in the business of, what we call creators of conviviality. So our culture is a convivial culture, and actually a little different from what you're saying, Shivani. I've seen that to be a great strength. Conviviality to us is the magic of human connections. When you look at the history of humankind, whenever people have come together, food, beverage, music are universal languages. I don't know how many of us understood the lyrics of Gangnam Style, but we all danced to it, or Jerusalem. So food, beverage, music is in that space. And we're not. We actually spend a lot of time, effort, resources in educating people on responsible drinking. Because that's sort of one of the things that comes with being at the top end of the market, and educating people on how to appreciate one of our finer products that we make and so on. So I just felt that I'd say that because I'm guessing that'd be a question on a few people's minds. About the role that culture plays. For me, the convivial culture has actually been a huge enabler. If you look at our leadership team today, there's a number of things that differentiated from possibly 4 to 5 years ago. The first thing that will hit you is it's a relatively young team. Our CEO would be mid 40s, probably one of the younger leaders that has led this business. A lot of the folks on the leadership team are relatively young. When we were looking at the way our demographics has changed in the last 3 to 5 years, we realized a number of our managers are new to the company. Some of them are new to the category as well. that fundamental culture of conviviality, which is the magic of human connections, actually holds us in great stead. That's where I've seen people very generously tell me the Glenlivet is 200 years old this year. We can teach you the category. We can teach you how the product is made and how the product is promoted. We can't teach you fundamental leadership skills. That's slightly tougher. So we'll hire for those skills. And
Hmm.
that's where, to me, culture. So if it's a project like Unbox, the fact that we have launched products in the past where we've said this is an insight that we're working on, we believe this is the right product for this time and space and this category of consumers, so we go after it with everything that we believe in. I think that conviction, coupled with the fact that we've got a very closely knit team, has always been a strength. To me, I'm worried when cultures of a company change very rapidly on the back of what's the flavor of the season. And that's probably where my generation gap widens. I've not worked in the spirit of full disclosure with a startup or a very young company. Accenture is probably the only startup I worked with when they were setting up their businesses outside of consulting 20 years ago. But yeah, to me, it's been a big strength. It's helped to create the ecosystem and the operating system on the back of which we're able to drive these changes.
Hmm.
It's helped to bring in a lot more transparency. It's helped to bring in a lot more confidence, and it talks to our purpose as an organization. And to come back to what I was saying at the start, that's what gives me a great sense of pride in being a part of Pernod Ricard.
I think to your point about generations, I guess across generations, we all feel that you might join a company for one reason, but you stay and grow perhaps very often because of the culture. So, yeah, felt across generations. Rajiv, how about you? How's your experience been with regards to culture catalyzing, stalling, enabling changes that business wanted to make?
Okay, so I'll have to sort of step back a little bit and start by answering the question, what is culture? And to me, culture is the way people behave in their everyday lives in the organization, especially as they go about taking business decisions, right? That's
Hmm.
the definition of culture for me. And the prime role, therefore, of the HR function is to create that culture which results in sustained business outperformance, unleashing the potential of the organizational ecosystem towards achieving the purpose of the organization, right? So culture then is the main thing that people have to, HR and the whole organization has to work for. That's how I look at it. And in Mahindra, clearly the defining uh, moment when things took a shift was when we embarked on the RISE initiative. So RISE was uh, a movement which was based on the purpose that we want to drive positive change in the lives of our stakeholders and communities to enable them to rise. And we were going to do that obviously through the products and services that we were making and the way we were interacting with our stakeholders, right? So that was really the defining moment for Mahindra. This was an initiative that formally was launched in 2009, 2010. And this then became the bedrock. This one line which said, our purpose is to drive positive change in the lives of our stakeholders and communities to enable them to rise. And we'll do that by challenging conventional thinking and innovatively using all our resources. So from this one sentence, all the business strategies and all the human capital practices uh, stemmed or flowed
Hmm.
from this one sentence. And therefore, we sort of set about uh, seeing how do we need to change the nuts and bolts of all the HR levers, whether it be recruitment, onboarding, the performance management system, the so-called talent management system, or the reward and recognition system. Everything was sort of aligned or realigned to make it sort of in line with this RISE philosophy. So that was the turning point, and that was the culture, the unleashing of potential by driving positive change. So I don't know whether I've answered your question at all, or I've
So
used too
it
many
really
words.
helps. I think, I'm just sort of connecting the dots for what you all also said about the technology change that happens. That is the the purpose, the why of what you're doing is so important. So I think even in what you both mentioned, the purpose that your respective companies have had has been such a like the backbone of the culture they've as a result fostered in the companies. It's almost that everybody rallies behind the same purpose, that then the desire to try something, innovate, all comes from that, because the purpose galvanizes the org. And I think that's something to take note for all of us, that how do you create meaning and purpose for individuals in their roles, in their teams, in the org. And it's so critical to how you unlock performance and just folks wanting to grow with the org. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's a
Yeah.
lesson for the ages.
Shivani, I just wanted to really, I just wanted to say this as a fan, Rajiv. I loved the Rise campaign. I
Oh,
thought it gave, and right after the way the logo changed for the group,
yeah.
and then the Rise campaign, and then the way you linked it up, I thought it gave the entire M&M group a very, very, and I say this as a layperson at a distance, it gave it a very, very future facing sort of outlook. So absolutely huge fan, loved it.
Great, thank you so much. And of course, what you didn't see was the sort of the inner engineering. That was, I mean, the Rise campaign, which is the sort of the ads, etc. Was the external manifestation
Yeah,
of a huge amount of internal engineering, which is
yeah,
an ongoing process. I mean, it's not
yeah,
100-meter dash. It's an ongoing
yeah.
marathon, which has, of course, as you would know, or everybody here would know, has its highs and its lows,
Yeah.
and it requires a lot of effort at all levels, at all times, to keep it going.
No, I loved it. Especially the way you changed the logo to show the road ahead. That was so powerful along with Rise.
Thank you. So kind of you. And of course, I mean, I only am accepting it on behalf of 250,000 people.
Yeah, it'd be tough to write to all of them. So
I'll do that on your behalf.
We have fans in the chat as well, especially those reminiscing about the Rice campaign music also. Definitely, I think struck a chord.
Yeah, yeah. But as I said, that's one part. But
Hmm,
I'm talking more about the inner engineering, the
yeah,
culture part. Yeah.
yeah.
Because I
definitely.
think this is for today's conversation more relevant. Of course, the other piece is equally relevant. Yeah, the branding. Yeah.
Uh, like we started out saying that one force is of course technology, how the markets, consumers are changing. The other aspect is, like, I think Rajiv, you briefly touched upon it, how the Mahindra Wheels team is so young. So I think that brings us to the next area we sort of wanted to unpack with you, which is about how our workforces are multi-generational. They've always been multi-generational, but at this stage there is a newer generation coming in, another generation finding its footing, and a third generation growing, maturing with the organization. So at the outset, if you we just like to understand from you, what is the generational makeup broadly of your organizations, and how have you perhaps seen it change over the last 5 years, and what has that meant for you as the people function? Like, what has it either alerted you to, or how has it perhaps influenced strategy? So if you'd like to share your views.
So Shivani, for us, when I look at my median age, we're a little bit on the higher side compared to the median age of the larger Indian population. But like I said, the leadership team to begin with is fairly young. A whole bunch of new folks in the organization. So again, this is where I fundamentally I worry about so much conversation around Gen X and Gen Y. I think somewhere millennials and everybody else, my worry is somewhere in the middle of all of that conversation, we forget the absolute fundamentals and basics. I think things like empathy and things like the art of having a conversation, at the risk of never say never, I don't think they'll ever go out of whack or out of stop being in vogue. To me, that's still absolutely fundamental. So but coming to your specific question, I mean, to me it's the way we're looking at sort of the generational categories, or sub cohorts, if I might, is it takes it really takes a village to raise a brand, and to raise an organization. So we realize there's heritage and there's learning on both sides. I think what
Mm.
we try and do quite a bit is with the folks who are coming in new to the company. While we might have a work from anywhere policy, etc., we try and get them together, and we try and get them to meet as many people from the existing team as possible. So especially our mid and senior managers, when we're doing onboarding for them, because that group carries a disproportionate amount of onus on what the company culture actually looks like. I can paint it on a poster, and I can make those films and create really heart-wrenching posts, but ultimately it's how this group walks the talk that
Mm.
defines what my culture stands for. With this group, we actually, not just get the leadership team to speak with them, but we organize a fireside chat where we try and get people from across, try and get them from across functions and across experience groups to just talk about what their careers with PRI has been like. We don't give them any pitches and say, there are three messages you will deliver before the session is over. It's just to get to know the company. The second thing that we try and do in the onboarding session is tell folks who by age or tenure are new to the company that the onus of building bridges is on them.
Mm.
The simplest, fastest, surefire way to piss somebody off is to keep bragging about what company you're from. And for all my young friends on this call, to keep reminding people which B school you went to.
Pet
uh,
peeve.
you know yeah, I sincerely request young people, once your campus placement is done, hide away your MBA certificate as far away as you can. If that's the only part to your identity, you're going to be a chronically boring person for the rest of your life, and it's the easiest way to upset people. um, so we asked them to do their work on really sort of building those bridges. And to me, that's been one of the things that has accelerated the entire forming and norming cycle. The other bits are around both formal and informal mentoring.
Mm.
We had that question come up very recently on one of our town halls, and my humble submission was, while the HR team does create these platforms, to me the most efficient mentoring has been when I walked up to somebody and said, hey, can I get an hour from you every 3 or 4 months, and in return I'm happy to crunch data for you or do your slides or some sort of reverse mentoring. I mean, I'm here today because Akhilesh is who I work with on the Young Talent Council, and he's an amazing reverse mentor. He said, "Be here at 3 p.m., so I better report on time." To me, it's that give and take that is seriously crucial. Uh, and honestly, to me, it's a little bit more heat, less light when I hear these conversations about intergenerational conflicts, etc. To me, it doesn't matter which generation you're from. You can be more data savvy than the others, but again, you're not different from a humanoid. And that's where, to me, humility, empathy, being able to have a conversation is stuff that will hold us in good stead no matter who we're speaking with, sometimes even when you don't understand the language.
Mm. They're definitely golden lessons for everyone adjusting to a workplace across generations and across changes. That's so true. Rajiv, how about you?
Yeah, so I also would like to view this whole multi-generational thing in a certain context. And to me, it is the context that is a bigger driver of the, changes that we are seeing, and not necessarily just the age, right?
Hmm.
So let me just step back. What am I talking about? This so-called new normal, where things are changing. So there's VUCA and there's something called Bani. So let's say VUCA stroke Bani. That's one set. Everything is changing. The second part, which people don't talk about so much, is that there is a lot of pushback that is coming from all stakeholders, right? A pushback, whether it be from consumers, from employees, from communities, now from Mother Nature. There is a pushback.
Hmm.
And finally, there is interconnectedness, the huge interconnectedness. So, if you take these three broad streams, what does it imply for the way any business must behave? And here is what my very sort of simplified sort of view is, that this means that right through the value chain of any organization, there needs to be proactive, iterative decision making at all points, at many points in the value chain, which in turn means that we have to have a movement away from the old command and control to distributed leadership. And it is in the context of distributed leadership, which of course means there should be empowerment. Uh, and then we can go into what is empowerment, and I don't want to make it too complex. It is in that context that I would look at some of the very obvious things that people talk about, Gen Z and whatever. I have never really understood what Gen Z and baby boomers. Anyway, to me, they are not really important. I think N is equal to 1 is the right way to look at things when we are talking about people in an organization. And it's more to do with individuals rather than age-based thing. I believe, but somebody's going to come and hit me on the head. I don't know how many people there are, young people, 240 people will come and hit me on the head and say, you're all wrong. But, as I said, of course, there's some things I love, so for sure, command and control is out. Giving gyan is out. It's more about listening. It's more about co-creating. But that's exactly what distributed leadership is all about. That's a business imperative, right? That you can't command and control would be a disaster in this kind of a situation, right? If you have one person who has to take all decisions, can you imagine how disastrous it would be for the speed with which an organization reacts or is proactive, right? But for sure, I think this business of command and control is going to go out. Earlier on, I've seen command and control. Now, whether that was due to the age factor or whether that was just due to the business conditions and to the ruling paradigm of what was the right form of leadership. And, it was the command and control, the military industrial leadership, but that's not going to work in the new change business circumstances. And that's the context in which I would like to look at how we should behave with our employees, regardless of their age, because I do believe that our basic needs, I think, but you can correct me, I think our basic needs are number one, to be connected, number two, to feel that we are making a difference, and number three, to be recognized for the difference that we are making. And of course, now to keep learning all the time, right? So these are some basic needs, whether you're 63 years old or 22 or 45. My sense, and I also have some studies, famous McKinsey study, for example, that says that, it's not so much the age that is making a difference, but it's, the individual thing, the individual needs, and which are more dictated by the kind of things that I've talked about. So that's my humble take to your answer, to your question.
I think these are some very valuable, practical, lessons for us to keep in mind as we navigate the workspace. I think, like you called out from over your years of experience, perhaps the workspace will always change a few years. Things will change, but these are some skills to hold close and develop.
Can I just say one thing, please? I know you haven't asked me. There was one book that had a very profound influence on me. It was a book whose title was Hard Facts, Dangerous Half-Truths, and Total Nonsense. I don't know whether any of you...
Yeah, the
you
9
read
lies
that
about
book?
feedback, Marcus Buckingham.
No. This was Jeffrey Pfeffer and Sutton, right? But it really said that a lot of our so-called beliefs and the sacred cows that we worship are actually, either dangerous half-truths or total nonsense. But, somebody wrote about it somewhere, or some, fancy CEO said it, and then we all started believing it, like that horrible thing called the some forced curve. I don't know what you call it. Normal curve. I don't know what is the word that people use, and they used it to destroy lives of people.
Oh, the
There was
bell
a
curve.
guy called Jack Welch who sort of made it very famous, right? And that's one of the total nonsense things as far as I'm concerned, because it wasn't really based on any evidence. So I just wanted to say that we have to be very careful to go by hard facts and by evidence. And that's where AI, etc., can be useful, provided what you feed in is robust and meaningful. I mean, we have the old GIGO problem, garbage in and garbage out. You can massage as much as you want, but you have to make sure. So, I mean, there are many aspects to the use of technology, and this is not the session for it, but technology is necessary, unavoidable, but
Hmm.
it's not sufficient. You have to see it in the context of many other factors in the ecosystem which finally result in performance. I guess that's the point I want to make.
No, that's so true. Like, I think earlier, like Neetu, you'd also said at the beginning of the session, it has to be a conduit, it has to be a tool. But how you use the tool is still in hands. It's in our hands. So, yeah.
Yep.
And thank you for sharing the book recommendation. Definitely going on my to be read list, and Gautam's posted it for the audience as well. While I continue to have questions because you've raised such important points to delve deeper into, but at this point, what we'll do perhaps is we'll open up for the audience's questions and answers. So what I'll request is the members who've joined us, if you could just raise your hands, we'll call out your names and then you can unmute yourselves and mention which panelist you're asking the question to, and then go ahead and ask your question. Great. We already have the first question from Nakul Malhotra. Nakul, go ahead, ask your question.
Vanya, are you able to hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, perfect. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Neetu and Rajiv, for those words of inspiration and the wisdom that you shared with throughout the session till now. Rajiv, one thing which I just wanted to understand. Right now, you were mentioning of things that it depends on the individual and not exactly the generation that they in fact come from. But as and when you actually go out into the community on things like probably a mental wellness or even acknowledging that someone's mental wellness is not doing so okay, and when they actually see their younger counterparts and younger colleagues having an open conversation about that, how do you recommend that in an organization, in a team, can we sort of overcome that stigma of at least openly talking about it first, even before jumping to the conclusions on how to solve it?
I'm sorry, you'll have to. I couldn't get the real question. Are you saying
Okay.
that if people talk about their mental wellness, then it is
Right.
frowned upon? Is it in some organization? Is that what you're
I'll
saying?
I'll give an example. I'll give an example. So, for example, in my previous organization, so when the younger team members used to speak to their business HRs about mental wellness, okay, they used to obviously speak it much more openly and still do for that matter. And when those discussions were kind of discussed within teams, the elder counterparts would often say that there is nothing like this is all just a bahana to for non-performance, etc., etc. So in the modern day workplace where there is a mixture of older generation people and the younger generation people working together, how do you think can we as a team or as an organization or as a community kind of overcome that stigma?
Yeah. So I think, okay, so Neetu, would you like to go and answer or do you want me to? I think I'm talking too much. Maybe we should hear more what you have. I will answer that. I'm not trying to dodge you, Nikhil. I'll come back. But in case Neetu, I certainly know what to say, but maybe Neetu should.
Sure.
Oh, no, sorry, the question was to me. Oh, okay,
Ah,
sorry. Okay, okay. Yeah. So I think that we need to have the ability to listen more. The problem with older people, perhaps maybe it's there with younger people. I know it's a big problem with me, is we get into the gyan giving mode instead of listening. And therefore, I think the first requirement when we are dealing with multi-generational or anything, any other, where there is bound to be difference, we need to have respect for the other person's point of view. We should try to listen to it and we should not be ruled totally by our own biases. And the fact of the matter is that mental health and wellness is a major issue, I think for people of all ages. And I think it's just been sort of really brought to the fore after the pandemic because all of us were sort of closed up. But my advice to the older people would be please listen. And my advice to the younger people also would be that, try to be a little empathetic towards the older folk. Poor people, they are victims of their own beliefs and biases. So we need to have empathy for each other. It has to be both ways. And if we could only develop, it's a horrible word, I guess, compassion. That is so important. And there is a business case for compassion. And compassion is the ability to get into the shoes of the other person. It is so important to do that. If we want high performing teams, if we want high performance, so we need to. So my advice would be both to the younger people and to the older people, please listen, put yourself into the shoes of the other person before you start giving gyan. And please differentiate between what could be a bias and what is the truth. I don't know.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that answer. And thanks also for that question. We next have Priya Dattar. Priya, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. It's a lot insightful to listen to Mr. Rajiv and Ms. Neetu. The question I have here is, when we have the generations of two or three, basically two segments working together, it really becomes very hard to keep people motivated for over a period of time. Whatever efforts the management tries to take towards the employees, it becomes short-lived. The fizz goes out very soon. So what do you think would really keep people motivated and align themselves with the organization for the days to come? The question is to both of you. Maybe both of you can share your thoughts on this.
Okay. You know, before I get into this answer, and I will get to it, if just my 2 cents on the last question. I work for a company where our wellness or sick leave is unlimited. So I get asked that question oftentimes by new folks to say, "Aren't you worried about it getting abused?" And that comes from across. There's no age tag to it. My humble submission is, if there is the first step on anything to do with mental wellness, is to give the other person benefit of doubt. As simple as that. Is there a possibility that we're being taken for a ride? Maybe. What if it's true? And give that benefit of doubt. That's the first one. And again, it's not about the old generation saying this is all talk and there's no materiality to it. It's just about give benefit of doubt if someone's telling you that, because unfortunately these weapons of mass distraction that we carry in our pockets have destroyed any semblance of actual connectivity between people to a fairly large extent. um, the second thing is our policies have to, if that's how susceptible we are to abuse, then our policies have to get smarter and ahead of that. And we don't create policies for the 1% of people who will abuse them. Policies are written for the 99% that don't, and 99% don't. As simple as that. To the question about motivating folks, I think my way of looking at it is two parts. Equipping managers and starting with people when they take on their first managerial position. So whether it's management trainees or internal promotions, on how we're equipping them to deal with people. I'm less worried about um, how folks react when the company is trying to do something. At the end of the day, my life is so influenced by the manager that I work with. At the end of the day, and that is where equipping that person. The second thing to me is, are we running the risk of creating solutions and then looking for problems? When we look at motivation as a almost a sub theory in itself. So when we did R&R at PRI, for example, we spent 6 months doing the diagnostics, because most R&R programs make 10 people marginally happy, a little bit happy, but they make 90 other people extremely unhappy. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what's meaningful recognition going to be, and what do you want. And they said, can you just tell us who the nominees are? Just be transparent. So transparency was a big one. Then it came down to involve our families and a bunch of things. And then there were some things we did and some things that we said we probably look at a later point. To me, those are things that hold us in good stead. Equip our people. um, and I'm scared of these things called best practices. I'm mortally scared of them. Best practices have a context. That's classical solution looking for problem. And to me, managers, they are fundamentally just coming down to being able to have a chat, whether it's wellness or how their team is doing or what is going on with them. I have to quote Chandramouli Venkatesan once every time I'm on a forum like this. He's a mentor that I miss dearly. He used to do this exercise. He'd get people to write down the names of people that they believe deserve to be in the positions that they're in, and make a second list of who they don't believe deserve to be in the positions that they're in. I stopped doing this experiment because the second list we run out of time. And my only question when I meet new managers for onboarding is which list they think their teams will put them into, and then to behave according to that list. I think that's also a lot of, it just creates room for reflection on how are my teams reacting and what's their motivator.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So,
go ahead, Rajiv.
yeah, so let me build on what Neetu said. So I think that's music to my ears, Neetu, that oftentimes we don't spend enough time asking ourselves, what is the problem that we need to solve for? And why is this the problem that we need to solve for? Because the solutions must come thereafter. Oftentimes we plunge into the solution without spending enough time on identifying the real problem and asking ourselves, why is it a problem and for whom? So let's assume that we have identified the real question, the burning question to which we want to find the answer. For anything to be sustainable and motivating, I believe that the solution should be co-created. It should not be handed top down. People who are going to be affected, the stakeholders, should be involved both in identifying what the problem is and in co-creating the solution, because then there will be deep solutions and there will be ownership. And that's the only answer to sustainability. Nothing will sustain unless what is being attempted is meaningful and significant and owned by the people who are going to be impacted by it. That's what I would say. Utopian though it may sound.
But I think also very fundamental, just to recall ourselves of the fundamentals. I know we are at the top of the hour, but I just wanted to check, Rajiv and Neetu, if you'd have time for one more question.
I'm fine. Yeah.
Great. So I think Anand Patathil has raised his hand. Anand, you can go ahead, and that will be our final question for this discussion. So yeah, go ahead, ask your question.
Yes, thank you, Shivani. Sorry, I hope you got her name right. Shivani, right? I'm so sorry.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, thank you. And hi, Neetu, and hi, Rajiv. It's a pleasure listening to you for the past 60 plus minutes. A lot to learn. Your perspectives on various topics did open my eyes as well. And of course, I would one day like to see myself get to where you are as a leader in the HR space. The meeting is, or this meeting is set up to discuss revamping talent management strategies for the modern workplace. Now, we can't have a discussion on the modern workplace without talking about ChatGPT. And that's a question that I had on that revolves around that specific tool. From a performance management perspective, or from a talent management perspective in general, it's highly likely that in today's age, people use ChatGPT a lot for the smallest of things, or sometimes for the largest of things. Because it makes work easy. There's no denying that. But my question is on recognizing performers, recognizing someone who really put in his or her efforts to develop something that was new from all the way from scratch. Is that indeed that person's efforts, or could it have been ChatGPT that did the work behind, or that did all the legwork, and this person just had to present it, package it, and do it whatever, maybe just fill in the blanks in between, if you will. So how do we, in today's age where ChatGPT is being used heavily, how do we rightly evaluate our team members' performance from a performance management perspective? How can that be done by leaders across industry? To somebody's point, this is not industry specific, this is industry agnostic. How do we do that? How do you do that if you want to not give a specific answer and not a broad answer? Either way, and this question can be taken by either of you. You are both equally capable of answering this.
I'm very tempted to chat GPT the answer to this question. So my way of looking at it is, I see it as a great enabler. I ask my teams to use it when we're putting job descriptions together for a new role, etc. Why should, to me, it's the same thing as someone creating a great deck and someone else, handcrafting that. It's a tool that's available. Please use it. I think I personally like the way Dr. Thomas Camaro Primuzek looks at it, to say any of generative AI will make it easier for people to look like an expert. It's still going to be tough to
Exactly.
be an expert. Yeah. So if my team
Yes.
is using it to respond to emails, and those emails are professional, they sound great, they're on point, I'm glad that they saved 3 minutes. If they're using it to write a job description, they're using it to prepare a deck, they're personalizing and contextualizing that deck solves my issue. It helps me write a policy. If I can get a policy from chat gpt and then my team is adapting it to my company, my assumption is they're saving time to be at the point of sale and at the point of manufacturing where I'd like them to be. That's not something generative AI can replicate, at least from what we know of as of right now. So I see it as a welcome thing. My worry is if it's coming up to me without any sort of value add, and that's where I believe my skill or the lack of it, or my depth or the lack of it, comes to play on whether I can see and spot that or not. um, to me, it's the same worry all of us had when Google came in, to say now assignments are all going to be done by Google and nobody will earn a degree on their own. I think that was a little bit exaggerated. So I see it as a great enabler. I see it as um, it's saving valuable time that my team can spend doing on things that matter a lot more and create a lot more impact.
Yeah, I mean, I would go along with what Neetu said, that Chat GPT is an enabler. What is important is the impact that you make. And, you don't have to be original. Nobody is original. We all, what we call original is actually using bits and pieces from here and there. Now, it's only if you claim that I have not used GPT when you have used GPT, then there is an issue. Then your integrity is in question, and we don't want people who don't have integrity. But it's a tool, and if you're using it for having an impact that is good and required, then what is the harm? You can't prevent people from using Chat GPT. I would say that. Yeah. Unless you're claiming, oh, I have not used Chat GPT. Then it's a different
Oh boy,
question that we
then
are.
please get out of the rock that you're living under. Because there's no reason to write those long emails. Actually, long emails anyway are a thing of the past. But yeah, I mean, it's, as long as it's used as an enabler, it's a fantastic thing.
True. And I think, just had a moment when you said that, like for all of us, just taking a moment to realize that, yeah, Google was also new at one point. It's just become like a lifeline now. But yeah, it would have caused a similar disruption. Something to keep in perspective. Uh, Thank you so much for that question. And thank you so much, Neetu and Rajiv, for being so patient, so generous with your insights, taking the time to spend your Friday afternoon with us. I think I echo the sentiment in the chat that we've all found really fundamental, practical lessons to keep in mind as we perhaps get back to work after this and on Monday. Really appreciate you extending as well. And thank you so much for everyone who joined this conversation. We hope it was useful for you. And we look forward to your feedback post this as well on what you'd want to hear more from us on. And just on the screen, if you have a minute, this is just a brief overview of the NHRDN network. It's one of India's most premier, oldest, most respected forums for HR professionals. So if you'd like to enjoy and learn from conversations such as this, network with the finest in the industry, perhaps learn from courses, certifications, explore the NHRDN memberships, and there's definitely something for everyone here. So thank you so much. On that note, everybody have a great Friday, wishing you a great weekend, and thank you for joining in.
Yeah, thank
Take
you
care.
so much
Thank you.
for giving
Thank you
this
for having
opportunity. It was a great experience for me. I was very nervous, but it was really wonderful and I learned a lot. Thank you.
Lovely.
Thanks.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Shivani. Thank you, Akhilesh, for holding a gun to my head. I have to be voluntold into these things. Rajiv, always a pleasure listening to you.
Likewise.
Great learning. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights so generously. Have a good weekend, everyone. Thank you.